Picture this. You're planning the perfect American road trip, scrolling through Instagram posts of stunning landscapes and charming small towns, completely unaware that some U.S. states are basically economic disaster zones disguised as tourist destinations, where your GPS might lead you into political chaos, environmental catastrophes, or economic black holes that make third world countries look fiscally responsible. Welcome back to the channel where we turn domestic travel planning into a crash course in American political dysfunction and economic geography. Today, we're counting down the 10 U.S. states you should absolutely avoid in 2025. And trust me, the reasons go way deeper than bad weather or expensive gas prices. From states that are literally fleeing their own populations to places where the infrastructure is held together with thoughts and prayers, we're diving into the fascinating ways that American federalism can create dramatically different living conditions within the same country. These aren't just travel warnings, they're lessons in how geography, politics, and economics can turn the American dream into the American nightmare. So buckle up for a reality check that'll make you appreciate wherever you currently live, no matter how much you complain about it. State number 10, West Virginia, the mountain state that time forgot. West Virginia kicks off our countdown at number 10 as the state that somehow managed to turn being literally on top of valuable natural resources into an economic disaster movie. This mountain paradise proves that having coal, natural gas, and scenic beauty means absolutely nothing if your economic strategy peaked in 1950. The population exodus is absolutely staggering. West Virginia is the only state that has fewer people today than it did in 1950, losing residents faster than a leaky bucket loses water. Young people flee to other states as soon as they graduate high school, leaving behind aging populations and abandoned towns that look like post-apocalyptic movie sets. It's like watching demographic suicide in slow motion. The economic dependence on dying industries created a one-trick pony that never learned any other tricks. Coal mining provided good jobs for decades, but when the world moved toward cleaner energy, West Virginia doubled down on coal instead of diversifying. Now they're like that friend who still thinks flip phones are the future, technically correct about some things, but missing the bigger picture entirely. The infrastructure decay is visible everywhere you look. Roads that were built for much smaller populations now crumble under reduced tax revenue, while bridges and utilities operate on maintenance budgets that would make medieval kingdoms look well-funded. Your scenic mountain drive might involve dodging potholes that could swallow small cars. But if you think economic stagnation is depressing, wait until you meet the state where natural disasters and political dysfunction team up to create the perfect storm of misery. State number 9, Louisiana, the Bayou State drowning in problems. Louisiana sinks into our number 9 spot as the state that's literally disappearing into the Gulf of Mexico while simultaneously dealing with political corruption so legendary that federal prosecutors have permanent offices in New Orleans. This cultural jewel proves that amazing food and music can't solve climate change and systematic governmental dysfunction. The land loss crisis is an environmental catastrophe happening in real time. Louisiana loses a football field worth of coastline every 100 minutes due to subsidence, sea level rise, and decades of oil industry damage to protective wetlands. Your vacation to New Orleans might be visiting a city that won't exist in 50 years. It's like disaster tourism with jazz soundtracks. The political corruption is so pervasive it's practically a tourist attraction. Louisiana has sent more politicians to federal prison than most states sent to Congress, with corruption scandals involving governors, mayors, sheriffs, and judges becoming such regular occurrences that locals barely notice anymore. It's like watching a real-life version of organized crime, except the criminals run the government. The insurance crisis makes home ownership a high-stakes gambling game. Property insurance companies are fleeing Louisiana faster than residents evacuate for hurricanes, leaving homeowners with skyrocketing premiums or no coverage at all. Buying a house here is like investing in a lottery ticket where the jackpot is not losing everything to natural disasters. The economic inequality creates stark contrasts between wealthy tourism areas and poverty-stricken communities that lack basic services. New Orleans' French Quarter attracts millions of visitors, while nearby neighborhoods struggle with crime, unemployment, and infrastructure failures that government officials seem powerless to address. From sinking bayous to desert economic mirages, our next state shows what happens when boom and bust cycles create communities built on false promises. State number 8, Nevada, the silver state with fool's gold economics. Nevada gambles into our number 8 position as the state that built its entire economy on activities that financial advisors specifically warn people to avoid. This desert playground proves that what happens in Vegas definitely doesn't stay in Vegas when economic reality comes knocking. The economic volatility makes Nevada's boom and bust cycles more dramatic than soap opera storylines. When times are good, Las Vegas builds massive resorts and housing developments, but when recessions hit, unemployment skyrockets and construction projects become abandoned monuments to economic overconfidence. It's like riding a financial roller coaster where the safety harnesses are made of wishful thinking. The housing market insanity creates affordability crises that make millionaires out of real estate speculators while pricing out working families. Las Vegas home prices swing more wildly than slot machine payouts, with rapid appreciation followed by disastrous crashes that leave homeowners underwater on mortgages. Your dream retirement home might become a financial nightmare faster than you can say jackpot. The water scarcity issues makes Nevada's growth model fundamentally unsustainable. Building massive cities in the desert requires importing water from increasingly stressed sources, while climate change reduces snowpack that feeds the Colorado River. Las Vegas is basically a monument to human defiance of natural limitations, except nature always wins eventually. The tourism dependence means that global economic problems instantly become local disasters. When people stop traveling, Nevada's economy crashes harder than amateur poker players at high-stakes tables. The state's fortunes rise and fall based on whether people in other states feel wealthy enough to lose money on vacation. The social costs of gambling-based economy include addiction rates, family dysfunction, and crime problems that tourism marketing carefully avoid mentioning. Building prosperity on activities that create personal financial ruin for visitors creates moral contradictions that permeate local culture and governance. But if desert economic mirages seem risky, our next state proves that even natural beauty and tech industry presence can't solve fundamental political and economic dysfunction. State 7, California, the golden state with lead pipe dreams. California crashes into our number 7 spot as the state that somehow turned being the world's 5th largest economy into a masterclass in how wealth inequality, housing costs, and political dysfunction can make paradise unlivable for anyone who isn't a tech billionaire. This Pacific powerhouse proves that economic success and quality of life can move in completely opposite directions. The housing crisis has reached levels of absurdity that make dystopian novels look optimistic. The median home price in California is so high that teachers, nurses, and firefighters literally cannot afford to live in the communities they serve, creating a service economy where essential workers commute 2 hours each way from affordable areas. It's like economic apartheid disguised as market forces where your zip code determines whether you're middle class or homeless. The taxation system punishes both success and failure with equal enthusiasm. California has the highest state income tax rates in the nation, combined with sales taxes, property taxes, and fees that make simple transactions feel like government fundraising events. Meanwhile, the tax revenue gets spent on programs that somehow never seem to solve the problems they're designed to address, creating a perpetual cycle of higher taxes and persistent dysfunction. The regulatory environment makes starting a business feel like navigating a government obstacle course designed by people who've never run a lemonade stand. Environmental regulations, labor laws, and permitting processes can take years and cost millions before you even open your doors, which explains why companies are fleeing to Texas faster than families flee California housing costs. The infrastructure decay is stunning for a state with such massive tax revenue. Roads that serve the world's largest port complexes crumble under traffic loads, while water systems built for smaller populations struggle to serve megacities in desert climates. The state that pioneered technological innovation can't figure out how to keep electricity flowing during normal weather conditions. The political dysfunction creates governance by crisis rather than planning. California lurches from emergency to emergency, wildfires, droughts, homelessness, budget crises, without addressing underlying causes, preferring symbolic gestures and blame shifting to actual problem solving. It's like watching a reality TV show where the contestants are running a government. But if you think high costs and political theater are problematic, our next state shows what happens when extreme ideology meets economic reality in ways that make everyone miserable. State 6, Texas, the Lone Star State with 5-star problems. Texas swaggers into our number 6 position as the state that built its entire identity on being independent and self-reliant, then promptly created infrastructure and governance failures that require constant federal bailouts. This energy powerhouse proves that talking tough about government while building systems that collapse during normal weather creates problems that cowboy boots can't solve. The power grid disaster revealed infrastructure planning that makes third-world countries look competent. Texas built an isolated electrical system to avoid federal regulations, then discovered that independence doesn't keep the lights on when temperatures drop below freezing. The 2021 winter storm killed over 200 people because the state that produces more energy than most countries couldn't keep electricity flowing during a cold snap that northern states handle routinely. The regulatory contradictions create a state government that simultaneously claims to hate regulation while micromanaging local decisions with authoritarian enthusiasm. Texas preaches local control while passing state laws that override city ordinances about everything from plastic bags to police funding, creating a system where small government means big government at the state level instead of federal level. The immigration politics create economic dependencies that the political rhetoric refuses to acknowledge. Texas agriculture, construction, and service industries rely heavily on immigrant labor, while politicians campaign on anti-immigration platforms, creating cognitive dissonance where the economy needs what the politics condemns. It's like building your house with materials you simultaneously claim are dangerous. The urban-rural divide has reached levels of mutual incomprehension that make national political divisions look friendly. Texas cities become increasingly blue while rural areas become more red, creating internal political conflicts where different parts of the same state operate with completely different worldviews and policy preferences. The climate change denial runs headfirst into climate change reality. Texas leads the nation in renewable energy production while electing politicians who claim climate change is a hoax, creating policy schizophrenia where practical necessity and ideological purity exist in parallel universes within the same government. The healthcare access problems affect both rural and urban areas despite the state's massive wealth. Texas has the highest uninsured rate in the nation while rejecting Medicaid expansion that would provide federal funding for healthcare access, preferring ideological purity to practical solutions for residents' health needs. From Lone Star contradictions to heartland hurricanes, our next state proves that being geographically central doesn't protect you from politically peripheral decision-making. State 5, Oklahoma, the sooner state that should have waited longer. Oklahoma tornadoes into our number 5 spot as the state that somehow took oil wealth, agricultural abundance, and strategic central location and turned them into a recipe for educational underfunding, infrastructure decay, and political decisions that make observers wonder if the government is actively trying to drive residents away. This heartland state proves that natural advantages mean nothing if human decision-making is consistently terrible. The education funding crisis has reached such epic proportions that teachers fled to other states in numbers that made national news. Oklahoma ranks near the bottom nationally in teacher pay while cutting education budgets so severely that some school districts moved to 4-day weeks because they couldn't afford to operate 5 days. It's like a statewide experiment in how to destroy your future workforce while politicians claim to support family values. The tax policy creates boom and bust cycles that make Nevada's gambling economy look stable. Oklahoma's heavy dependence on oil and gas tax revenue means state budgets swing wildly based on commodity prices. When energy prices drop, the state government responds by cutting education and infrastructure instead of diversifying revenue sources. The natural disaster frequency makes Oklahoma feel like nature's target practice range. The state averages more tornadoes per square mile than anywhere else on Earth, while earthquakes increase dramatically due to fracking-related wastewater injection. Your quiet rural life could be interrupted by either spinning wind or shaking ground, sometimes in the same week. The brain drain accelerated as educated young people leave for states that fund universities, invest in infrastructure, and create economic opportunities beyond oilfield services. Oklahoma's best and brightest graduate from state universities, then immediately move to Colorado, Texas, or California for career opportunities that don't exist in their home state. The political culture embraces anti-government rhetoric while depending on federal military installations, agricultural subsidies, and disaster relief funding that keeps the state economy functioning. Oklahoma politicians campaign against federal spending while representing a state that receives more federal dollars per capita than most coastal states they criticize for being dependent on government. The infrastructure maintenance backlog includes bridges, roads, and water systems that operate on deferred maintenance budgets that make optimism a requirement for daily commuting. The state that helped build America's transportation infrastructure now struggles to maintain the roads and bridges that connect rural communities to economic opportunities. But if heartland dysfunction seems fixable, our next state shows what happens when geographic isolation meets economic stagnation in ways that create systematic population.
State number 4, Mississippi, the magnolia state that wilted under systematic neglect. Mississippi marches into our number 4 position as the state that has achieved the remarkable feat of ranking last or near last in virtually every quality of life metric, while politicians continue implementing the exact same policies that created these problems. This Deep South state proves that ideological consistency can trump practical results for decades without anyone questioning whether the approach might be fundamentally flawed. The poverty statistics are absolutely staggering and persistent across generations. Mississippi has the highest poverty rate in the nation, with over 20% of residents living below the federal poverty line and median household incomes that make other poor states look prosperous. It's like watching a real-time experiment in how to maintain economic underdevelopment in a country with the world's largest economy. The education crisis goes beyond simple underfunding into systematic failure that perpetuates cycles of poverty and limited opportunity. Mississippi consistently ranks at or near the bottom in national education metrics, with literacy rates, graduation rates, and college preparation scores that create workforce limitations for any businesses considering locating in the state. They've essentially created an education system that guarantees their own economic stagnation. The healthcare access problems include some of the worst health outcomes in the developed world, with life expectancy, infant mortality, and chronic disease rates that make international comparisons embarrassing. Mississippi rejected Medicaid expansion while maintaining some of the highest rates of diabetes, heart disease, and obesity in the nation, creating a healthcare crisis that affects both individual families and economic development prospects. The political dysfunction maintains systems that clearly aren't working while blaming external factors for internal policy failures. Mississippi politicians consistently vote against federal programs that would benefit their constituents, preferring ideological purity to practical improvements in residents' lives. It's like watching people repeatedly touch hot stoves while insisting the problem is that stoves exist. But if systematic state-level failure seems impossible to top, our next state shows what happens when ideological experiments meet economic reality in ways that create textbook examples of policy disasters. State number 3, Kansas, the sunflower state that wilted under supply-side experiments. Kansas cuts into our number 3 spot as the state that became a real-world laboratory for supply-side economic theory and accidentally proved that tax cuts don't magically create prosperity when you eliminate the government services that businesses and families actually need. This heartland state demonstrates how ideological economics can destroy practical governance faster than tornadoes destroy trailer parks. The tax experiment disaster created one of the most spectacular policy failures in modern American political history. Governor Sam Brownback's massive tax cuts were supposed to stimulate economic growth, but instead created budget crises that forced cuts to education, infrastructure, and social services, while economic growth lagged behind neighboring states. It's like watching someone try to lose weight by cutting off their legs, technically reducing numbers while creating much bigger problems. The education funding cuts became so severe that the Kansas Supreme Court repeatedly ruled the state was unconstitutionally underfunding schools, while some districts closed early due to budget shortfalls. Kansas went from having respected public schools to creating education systems that made parents consider moving to other states for their children's futures. They turned education funding into a constitutional crisis while claiming to support family values. The political extremism reached levels that made moderate Republicans flee their own party, while conservative activists gained control of local school boards, city councils, and state legislature seats. Kansas politics became dominated by ideological purity tests that prioritized political correctness over practical governance, creating governmental dysfunction that affects basic services. The population loss accelerated as young people left for states with better job opportunities and families moved for better schools, creating demographic trends that make long-term economic recovery increasingly difficult. Kansas became a cautionary tale about how ideological governance can destroy a state's competitiveness within a few years. From supply-side disasters to urban violence combined with fiscal collapse, our next state proves that some problems are so complex and deep-rooted that they make all previous entries look manageable. State number 2, Illinois, the prairie state trapped in a downward spiral. Illinois tumbles into our number 2 position as the state that somehow combined Chicago's urban violence crisis with state-level fiscal collapse, creating a perfect storm of problems that make residents flee to other states while politicians argue about whose fault it is. This Midwest state proves that having one of America's greatest cities doesn't help when government dysfunction reaches epic proportions. The fiscal crisis has reached levels that make bankrupt cities look financially responsible. Illinois has the worst credit rating of any state, with unfunded pension liabilities exceeding $200 billion and budget deficits that create constant threats of government shutdowns. The Chicago violence statistics create urban warfare conditions in neighborhoods where children plan routes to school based on gang territory boundaries rather than distance. Chicago regularly records more murders than New York and Los Angeles combined, despite having smaller population, while shootings occur with such frequency that they barely make local news unless multiple people die in single incidents. The population exodus has accelerated to the point where Illinois loses residents faster than any other state, with people fleeing high taxes, poor services, violence, and economic stagnation for opportunities in Florida, Texas, and other states that offer better quality of life.
It's like watching demographic suicide where the state's best and brightest vote with their feet by leaving permanently. The taxation burden punishes both individuals and businesses while providing government services that consistently fail to meet basic expectations. Illinois residents pay some of the highest combined state and local taxes in the nation while receiving education, infrastructure, and safety services that perform worse than states with much lower tax burdens. The political corruption has become so routine that federal prosecutors maintain permanent offices in Chicago specifically to handle the steady stream of elected officials who get indicted for various crimes. Illinois has sent multiple governors to federal prison while maintaining political machines that seem designed to facilitate rather than corruption. Ready for the ultimate American state disaster? Because our number one choice combines every possible governmental, economic, and social failure into one spectacular example of how democracy can completely break down.
State number 1, New Mexico, the land of enchantment that forgot the enchantment part. New Mexico claims our number 1 spot as the ultimate example of how a state can have incredible natural beauty, rich cultural heritage, and valuable natural resources while simultaneously achieving catastrophic failure across virtually every measure of governmental competence and quality of life. This high desert state proves that having everything going for you means absolutely nothing if leadership consistently makes the worst possible decisions. The poverty crisis reaches levels that make other poor states look prosperous, with over 18% of residents living below the federal poverty line and child poverty rates that rank among the worst in the developed world. New Mexico has been stuck in a cycle of economic underdevelopment for decades, despite sitting on massive oil and gas reserves that should provide prosperity similar to Alaska or Texas. It's like finding a treasure chest and using it as a doorstop. The education system failure is so complete it defies explanation. New Mexico consistently ranks dead last or near last in national education metrics, with graduation rates, literacy scores, and college preparation that create workforce limitations for any economic development efforts. They've managed to take federal education funding, state oil revenue, and local property taxes and somehow produce educational outcomes that wouldn't be acceptable in developing countries. The crime statistics create safety concerns that affect both urban and rural areas, with property crime rates and violent crime rates that make residents feel unsafe in their own communities. Albuquerque's crime rates rival cities with much larger populations and more complex urban problems, while rural areas deal with drug trafficking and border-related criminal activity that overwhelms local law enforcement capabilities. The governmental dysfunction combines incompetence with corruption in ways that create compound failures across multiple agencies and policy areas. New Mexico politicians consistently make headlines for scandal, mismanagement, and policy decisions that seem designed to make existing problems worse rather than better. It's like watching a master class in how to fail at basic governance while blaming everyone except the people actually making the decisions. The economic diversification failure is stunning for a state with such abundant natural and cultural resources. Despite having oil and gas wealth, tourism attractions, agricultural potential, and proximity to major markets, New Mexico has failed to build sustainable economic development that provides opportunities for residents. Young people leave for other states immediately after college because there simply aren't career opportunities that match their education and ambitions. The infrastructure decay affects everything from roads and bridges to water systems and broadband internet, creating barriers to economic development that compound other systemic problems. New Mexico struggles to maintain basic infrastructure despite having significant federal funding, state oil revenue, and economic development grants that should enable modern systems. The political culture embraces victimhood and blame shifting rather than accountability and problem solving, creating governance by excuse rather than governance by results.
New Mexico politicians consistently explain why problems aren't their fault while implementing policies that perpetuate the same problems, creating a political system that seems designed to maintain dysfunction rather than solve it. The economic diversification failure is stunning for a state with such abundant natural and cultural resources. Despite having oil and gas wealth, tourism attractions, agricultural potential, and proximity to major markets, New Mexico has failed to build sustainable economic development that provides opportunities for residents. And there you have it, the 10 U.S. states that prove American federalism can create dramatically different outcomes within the same country, ranging from merely disappointing to absolutely catastrophic. From West Virginia's demographic death spiral to New Mexico's comprehensive governmental failure, these states show us that geography, politics, and leadership decisions can create vastly different realities for American citizens depending on which state they happen to live in. But here's the really sobering takeaway. These aren't just abstract policy failures or statistical anomalies. These are real places where millions of Americans wake up every day dealing with the consequences of bad governance, failed economic strategies, and political systems that prioritize ideology over results. Every ranking and statistic represent families struggling with poverty, students receiving inadequate education, businesses unable to find qualified workers, and communities watching their young people leave for better opportunities elsewhere. The most fascinating and terrifying aspect is how these state-level failures demonstrate that American success isn't guaranteed by democracy, capitalism, or constitutional protections. These states prove that you can have all the theoretical advantages of American political and economic systems while still creating outcomes that rival developing countries in terms of quality of life, economic opportunity, and basic governmental competence. What makes this even more relevant for 2025 is that these state-level differences are becoming more pronounced rather than less. As people become more mobile and information becomes more available, the gap between successful states and failing states widens as residents vote with their feet by moving to places that offer better opportunities, leaving behind communities that become increasingly distressed. The political implications are huge. These demographic shifts affect congressional representation, electoral college votes, and federal resource allocation in ways that reward successful state governance while potentially punishing states that most need federal assistance. It's like a spiral where success breeds more success while failure compounds into deeper failure. The real lesson here isn't just about which states to avoid for vacation or relocation. It's about understanding how American political and economic systems can produce radically different outcomes depending on leadership quality, policy choices, and cultural attitudes toward governance. These states prove that being American doesn't guarantee American-level prosperity, safety, or opportunity. So, which state's failure surprised you the most? Have you lived in any of these places and experienced firsthand how governmental dysfunction affects daily life? Or maybe you disagree with our rankings and think we missed even worse examples of state-level disaster. Drop your thoughts in the comments below, especially if you're from one of these states and want to defend your home or share stories about how political failures affect real families and communities. Smash that like button if this opens your eyes to how much American quality of life varies by state, and subscribe for more content that explores how geography, politics, and economics intersect to create the dramatically different realities that exist within our supposedly United States. And remember, understanding these state-level differences isn't just academic curiosity. Whether you're planning where to live, where to start a business, where to retire, or where to raise kids, these rankings reflect real policy outcomes that will affect your family's safety, prosperity, and opportunities. The American dream is still alive and well. You just need to be strategic about which states are actually committed to making it accessible to their residents. Now go forth and make informed decisions.